Boer prophet Siener van Rensburg. Visions as recorded by Anna Badenhorst. Part 8. 1 October 1918 till 31 December 1918. These are the visions Siener van Rensburg had and were written down by his daughter, Anna Badenhorst. The visions were interpreted by several persons, and these persons are mentioned with every vision. I personally do not do any interpretations myself. This channel can only survive with your help. If you would like to contribute and make more of these videos possible, please click the thanks button below the video. Thank you to Wynand Maree, whose contribution made this video possible. Thank you, Wynand. Let us begin with 1 October 1918. Vision number 371, Sieners. In the Union, a brown horse comes from the east. The horse comes to bags and tears them open. Then pale beans come out of the bags, and then the beans turn into corn. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Reports come in. Disbelieving people become pro-English. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. From Pretoria, an Afrikaner organization arrives. The organization arrives at a secret project and makes it public, and then communist skeptics appear. They are convinced and become believers. 3 October 1918, vision number 372, Sieners. The maize stands green on the fields, about 2 feet tall, but thin, and the maize disappears until there is nothing left. In Europe, there is a rough blue stone which changes into a wheel, and then the wheel starts rolling, and the wheel falls apart. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The Germans undertake a large offensive that fails. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. The maize stands green on the fields about 2 feet high, but thin. Then the maize disappears due to drought. In Europe, there is a dangerous German offensive. The offensive begins to advance. Then the offensive falls apart. Hitler's offensive? Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. The collapse of the Wall Street Stock Exchange will follow shortly after the closure of major financial institutions in Europe. Another later interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. The thin 2 feet high maize crops in Europe foretell a decline in prosperity and eventually famine, with Germany being the hardest hit. This is followed by the complete collapse of the powerful financial institutions, including the Wall Street Stock Exchange, which will occur soon after financial institutions in Europe face irreparable setbacks. 13 October 1918, vision number 373, Sieners. In the western side, there is a large dam wall, and on both sides of the wall there is water. However, on the wall there is a straight path going towards the west. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. All the world courts talk, news, about German West, Namibia. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. On the western side there is a large divide with news on both sides of the divide. A straight path goes to the west despite propaganda and indoctrination. 15 October 1918, vision number 374, Sieners. In the northwest of Europe, there is a crooked blue stone which turns into a plow wheel and breaks into pieces. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. This is a poorly executed offensive. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In the northwest of Europe, there is a skewed German ideology. It changes course and fails. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. The vision refers to Norway. 17 October 1918, vision number 375, Sieners. There is a small patch of land that has been dug up, and a beautiful blue stone has been uncovered. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann, a well thought out and organized offensive. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. A well thought out and organized offensive results in the emergence of a beautiful German ideology. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. It relates to Denmark. 20 October 1918, vision number 376, Sieners. A carriage with 4 horses comes from the northeast. Then I go to the west. In front of me is an unknown person. The springboks move towards the east, and the grass is tall and green. A new Boer veldskoen, Boer field shoe, comes from the north. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. A group of 4 horses indicates a long journey back. Then we go to German West, Namibia. We will be surprised by who we meet. The English flee east in Pretoria. A new government. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. A vehicle with 4 movements comes from the northeast. The Afrikaners go down to Southwest Africa, Namibia. Before the Afrikaners is a yet unknown leader. The soldiers secretly move eastwards in good conditions. 23 October 1918, vision number 377, Sieners. In the northeast, a large amount of water comes down from a kind of valley. The donkeys move west. They are fat, but there are only a few of them. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Good news comes from the northwest. The Afrikaners are moving to German West, Namibia. They are few, but their men are full of faith and trust. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In the northeast, a lot of news comes like a valley coming down. The true Afrikaners are heading to Southwest Africa, which is now Namibia, well armed, but not many of them. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. Broad water represents news. The second part means that we are moving to German West, Namibia. 1 November 1918, vision number 378, Sieners. Then the English wagons travelled to the southeast, with the teamster leading the way. In Europe, 3 sickles stood upright next to each other. Then they disappeared. Weeds were left behind. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The English in Africa are moving towards Port Elizabeth under the command of their leader. A triple action by England and 2 allies, America and Canada, but of short duration and insignificant. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. The English war equipment moves towards the southeast, and the leader is in front of the movement. In Europe, 3 communist groups appear side by side, upright, ready. When the threat is over, there are weeds, Christian reference. 3 groups of people after communism disappears in Europe. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. 3 sickles represent Germany, Finland, and Italy, or the Axis. 3 November 1918, vision number 379, Sieners. Then from the north to the west comes a tide of water, and at a certain place, yellow water flows out. The water then turns blue from behind and becomes clear. News in the Union. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. From the north, news comes in relation to Namibia. Also English news. From the origin, the English news becomes German. The news is purified of lies and is good news for us. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. News comes from the north to the west. Then a leak of English news occurs. Then German news takes the place of the English news. Then the news becomes the truth. Good news. 5 November 1918, vision number 380. Sieners. I come to a sorghum grain field where the grain is yellow and then it becomes pure white. Then there is a tunnel and the largest stream flows towards the east. Then a large stream of blue water comes and the front becomes a sickle. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Then we listen and compare the suppers' position and we see them becoming pro-Afrikaner instead of pro-English. Then we get a lot of German news and it is related to an offensive. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. The Afrikaner arrives in a land or region of black people. The black people turn out to be communist. Peaceful attitudes eventually replace communism. The television media then gives biased news, most of which is in favor of the government. A lot of German news comes through, and the first news is pro-communism. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. A stream of blue water is German news. The sickle represents danger. 6 November 1918, vision number 381, Sieners. The same vision appears with water, yellow water. Then it dries up and the grass grows in the furrow. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The English tried to impose their news on us again. Their words ran out, and then we drew inspiration from it. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. The same news media with English news. The news dries up, and the grass grows over the bad news. 8 November 1918, vision number 382, Sieners. Sheep are moving from south to west. Among the leading sheep are yellow goats, which also become sheep. In the east, clear raindrops fall to the ground. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. From Cape Town's side, Afrikaners are moving to Namibia. Among the leaders are English-minded English people. They change their stance and become Afrikaner-minded. In the east of our country, miracles are performed, blessings for us. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. Then Afrikaners are moving from Cape Town to Southwest Africa, despite their ideology. Among the leading Afrikaners are English people, and they also become Afrikaners. In the east, Pretoria, we receive blessings from God, and our faith is strengthened. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. Yellow goats are English, and sheep are Boers. Clear raindrops in the east mean a German invasion. 15 November 1918, vision number 383, Sieners. There is an agave tree with its lower leaves cut off and only a few top leaves remaining. And then more such trees appear. In Europe, a blue wagon with some of the paint peeled off stands loaded with its mouth facing west. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Isolated Englishmen and others take the same stance. Blue wagons indicate German defense. Some of the paint peeled off means that it has been standing there for a long time in relation to German West Africa, Namibia. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. Then there was an English politician who lost the support of his people and only had the support of the elites. There are more such politicians. Then in Europe, there is German war equipment. It is not new war equipment. It is loaded and ready to move west. War equipment for us. Interpretation by H.J. Dreyer. See also explanation on August 5, 1920 in later video, regarding the transfer of the German military from east to west. Wim Niklas saw the following image. Then in Europe there is a blue carriage. Some of the paint has come off the railings. It is loaded and facing west. Here we see the German military blue carriage that is prepared, loaded, to depart to the west, the direction the carriage's front is facing according to the vision. Now it can be inferred that the fighting in the east has ended. The carriage wants to leave for another battlefield, namely to the west. The carriage is also still in very good working order. All signs of wear and tear are that the paint on the railings is coming off here and there. The German armies will, so to speak, come back unscathed from the Russian campaign. Or more clearly stated, they will still be fully capable of successfully tackling the second front. All these smaller things are made known to us in order to enable us to determine the course of events more or less. Everything being quiet on the east front, we now just follow the carriage on its way to the west, and we await with anticipation the movement when it will make contact with the Anglo-American expeditionary force on French, Belgian, Dutch or German soil. We don't know where. And when then the second great battle, where the blood, according to Wim Niklas, will flow like water after a rain shower, will be delivered. The second Dunkirk. To this can only be added that the second error will be worse than the first. 17 November 1918, vision number 384, Sieners. There was a stream of yellow water that dried up. Then a fork appeared, and there was yellow water in an aardvark hole. There was then a small embankment, under which there was yellow water that wanted to flow, and the earth was ploughed. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. English news runs dry. The situation changes. English news in COVID form. Overall revolution in English news. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. A stream of English news comes, and then the news dries up. An investigation is launched, and now there is English news or propaganda in a bad, not very important position, and it becomes blocked or hidden, the news. Under the small embankment is English news that wants to spread. The earth was turned upside down. 19 November 1918. Vision number 385, Sieners. The world was like old farmlands, and the weeds stand tall, with a few maize stalks in between. Then the maize disappears. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The English news runs dry. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. The world is in a bad state, full of weeds, worthless. Communism is flourishing. 21 November 1918, vision number 386, Sieners. Far in the north, a red flag emerges, and the world is ploughed from the north. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The red flag means war. The revolution is here. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, the English try to get a foothold. Then the world was in confusion from the north. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. This is the first battle. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. Communism spreading its sinister influence across the world. 22 November 1918, vision number 387. Sieners. In the far north, another red flag appears, and the grass catches fire and burns towards the south. I'm driving a car over the ploughed ground towards the north. From there, towards the west. Then there is a narrow furrow from the west to Pretoria. There was pale water in the furrow, and then it dried up. Then in Europe there is a large yellow cow, and it is heading towards the south. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. A war offensive. Then we observe the war. The narrow furrow indicates little news and also unreliable news. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, the English are trying to regain control. Civil war breaks out and spreads to the south. The Afrikaners travel in a vehicle through the chaotic situation to Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. From here to southwest Africa, Namibia. There is very little news from southwest Africa to Pretoria, the propaganda. It was communist propaganda. The news dries up. In Europe, there is an important Englishman, and he goes to the south. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. It is a second battle. The yellow cow is the English. 25 November 1918, vision number 388, Sieners. In Europe, there is a large black spotted bull, and it is heading south in the Union of South Africa. Farmers are traveling with carts from the northeast to the west. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Black and white troops are moving towards German West, Namibia. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. There is a large black traitor in Europe who is a threat to South Africa. In South Africa, farmers, people who farm, from northeast with vehicles to southwest Africa, Namibia. 2 December 1918, vision number 389, Sieners. Agave trees are being moved from here to Pretoria. Agave trees are also coming from the west, but the others are drying up. Some merino sheep are coming up from the west. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Agave trees represent English officials. The fact that they are drying up indicates that they are powerless. Their stronghold is no longer effective. A second interpretation by Boy Mussmann. An English statesman and others from the Union concentrate in Pretoria and become powerless. Also from German West, and they also become powerless. The merino sheep give way to the difficulties on the coastal regions. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. English politicians leave here for Pretoria. Some from Southwest Africa also go, but the others achieve nothing. True Afrikaners come from the west and make progress. Wake up. 3 December 1918, vision number 390, Sieners. On the west side is a white cloth. The white cloth then opens and there are white beans inside, and they spread across the entire world. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. In Moscow, a white cloth symbolizing peace is opened, and it contains white beans representing non-believers who do not believe in fighting. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Southwest Africa, the facade of peace is lifted. The contents are revealed to the public. There are white non-believers and they spread throughout the world. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. The visions of Siener van Rensburg, which were recorded more than 70 years ago, predicted the resurgence of white racism in Europe, the West, and its rapid spread throughout the world. This has been evident in the shocking incidents of racism that have occurred in America and Germany, and continue to do so to this day. Van Rensburg saw that decades of brainwashing and exaggerated feelings of guilt would suppress this racism, but it would eventually be resurrected and accelerate. 5 December 1918, vision number 391, Sieners. Blue wagons are moving towards the south. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Germans are moving south towards Cape Town. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. German military equipment is moving towards the south. 8 December 1918, vision number 392, Sieners. A dark red bull standing far in the north, with its head facing east, standing like a bull ready to fight. Then a red, white-backed bull comes from the west to the east, its horns very sharp. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Dark red bull is Japan. Red white-backed bull is America. America is eager to fight. Japan is ready for America. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In the north of Europe, there is a dark-skinned communist leader. He favors communism. He is ready to fight. Then an American comes from the west to the east. Iran. He is very dangerous. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. The only time America, the white-backed bull, and Russia, the red bull, showed each other their teeth was during the Cuban crisis in 1962. 10 December 1918, vision number 393, Sieners. Then 5 red cattle come together in the west. The one has a bold patch. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, 4 English, 1 African, declare war on Japan. The bull with a bold patch indicates the Union under General Botha. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. 5 communist leaders gather. 1 is an Afrikaner. 12 December 1918, vision number 394, Sieners. In Europe, a straw hat appears, and then a woman with blue eyes appears, and she was wearing a hat. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. It indicates a German woman. See the conditions like the Germans without lies. The English did not achieve important advantage. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, a traditional English hat appears, and a nation with blue eyes, Germans, wears the hat. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. It is the era of Margaret Thatcher. 13 December 1918, vision number 395, Sieners. In Europe, there is only an agave tree, and the tree turns into a bunch of weedy flowers. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. An English person or government coming to us or appealing to us for help. Churchill, a statesman only in name. He has all the say, and he will be scorned. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, there is only one English politician, and he turns into a bunch of weedy flowers. 14 December 1918, vision number 396, Sieners. From the north, agave trees go to the east. From the west, they go to the colony, and here they wither. The blue wagon that has been standing there for a long time is now new and moving to the south. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. East refers to Durban and colony to Cape Town. English go from Pretoria and Johannesburg to Durban, from German West, Namibia, to Cape Town. And here they perish. Germans revive and pursue them there. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. From Rhodesia, English politicians go to Pretoria, or Russia. From Southwest Africa, they go to the colony. Literally, Southwest Africa representatives in the Cape Parliament. Representation is abolished. The German movement that was active in Southwest Africa is now active in Cape Town. 16 December 1918, Vision number 397, Sieners. A ship arrives on the sea, and when it reaches the land, there are peach trees in the west. At first, there were only leaves, but eventually they are full of fruit. A fork splits from the west to the trees, and when it reaches the trees, the whole world is plowed in the west. From the west to the east, there are maize with seeds that dry up and fall over. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The initial actions in the west do not promise fruit, no special prospects, but later the matter becomes promising. In response to this initial action, there is a complete upheaval from German West to Durban. The supper, who were now able to think for themselves and see, find their tactics exhausted and useless. They become powerless and disappear. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. A boat comes across the sea to the land, and when it arrives, the economy is ready for trade in Southwest Africa, Namibia. At the beginning stage, there are only leaves, but later it starts to bear fruit. The West undermines the economy. When it comes to the economy, everything is disrupted in the West. From Southwest Africa to Pretoria, there is a lot of prosperity, promising economy. The economy collapses. 20 December 1918, Vision number 398, Sieners. In the Cape Colony, the cars are moving towards the east, and a hand pushes them forward. An old yellow wheel rolls behind them on its hub. Then there are black chairs in a circle. Behind the chairs, on the backs of which are cleaned intestines. Then there hangs a slaughtered pig. The pig disappears, and then the sausage lies on the ground. Then there is a small black man here, chasing mixed-race sheep to the east. Among the front ones are goats. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. In the eastern province, there is a concentration of people. A hand pushes them forward, which means decisions are being made about capitalists. A bad method or approach leads to inferior Afrikaners in the wrong direction. Their forefathers are English. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In the Cape Colony, there are vehicles headed towards the east, towards communism, and they are pushed forward, and old English ideology is struggling after the vehicles. Black people are holding closed-door discussions. The quality of the discussions is low, the intestines. The loot is hanging to be divided. The loot disappears, and the sausage is left on the ground, meaning everything is lost. There is someone with a bad cause who is driving the people, the mixed-race individuals, not true Afrikaners, towards communism. Among the leaders are English people. An interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. This vision has disturbing undertones. People are being forced in a direction they may not even want to go. The yellow wheel relates to Islam's involvement. In this, Boy Mussmann points out that the wheel rolling on its hub clearly shows that the things that follow will happen without God's blessing. Black chairs in a circle indicates a black conspiracy. Intestines, meaning outsiders, will cooperate. Slaughtered pig is still a bad sign for the Afrikaner. Small black man, the same problem. The mixed race sheep are Jingos or Afrikaners who have become too English. They are being drawn into communism by the black people. 25 December 1918, vision number 399, Sieners. In the Union, there are oxen, plows, and people. Then they come to the west side, and the whole earth is plowed. Then here in the Union, there are flowers that seem like lilies, yellow shining color. And then they rise up in the air. And then a woman with brown clothes lies on her side. Then she stands up and walks. Then a figure of a person comes and says, "We have wept, now you weep." Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. A great division in the Union, South Africa, and the world is filled with various viewpoints and perspectives regarding German West, Namibia. The performance of the English, British government fades, and the child born at Koppies, Orange Free State, stands up and walks, implying that we are free. England will experience difficulties, and its women and children will weep, cry, and die, just like the 26,000 that died in the concentration camps. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In the Union, there are soldiers, plows, and people. They are becoming westernized. Then everything is chaotic. Children, lilies that have died. They go to heaven. The Afrikaner nation was humiliated, oppressed, brought to its knees. Then the Afrikaner people became independent. The messenger of God says, "We have wept, now you must weep." Boy Mussmann. On the day when our country becomes free and independent, God's messenger says that the Afrikaner people have wept. You, our oppressors, must now weep. The downfall of England. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. According to Mr. Boy Mussmann, Sieners said the following about this vision. On the eve of the rebellion, General de Wet and other veteran officers and citizens held a meeting at Koppies and decided that if Botha and Smuts decide to conquer Namibia for England, then he will hoist the flag and fight for a republic. Then Sieners said, "Our little girl is born, and we progress towards a republic. Our child grows bigger and bigger, and when she stands up and walks, becomes independent, then a human figure comes out and calls out, 'We have wept, now you, our oppressors, weep.'" 31 December 1918, vision number 400, Sieners. The whole world was ploughed to the west. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Everything is now subject to great upheaval. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. Then everything to the west was in confusion. This concludes this session of Visions. If you have questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section, and I will attempt to answer where possible. Please do subscribe and do click the notification bell so that you can be informed when videos are uploaded. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.